Hello everyone. Welcome to my channel. I'm really excited to bring you today's video. If you enjoy my content, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. Let's get started. The year 2015 would become unforgettable for a group of climbers who dreamed of scaling the world's highest mountain, Everest. With great determination and passion, they decided to climb the mountain. Each came from different countries, cultures, and varying levels of experience, but they all shared one common goal: to reach the summit of the Himalayas. These brave individuals from all corners of the globe knew that reaching the summit of Everest was not only a physical challenge but also a mental test. However, most of them thought that as long as they survived, they would be the winners of this journey. The climbers meticulously prepared for the challenge. Many experienced mountaineers gathered information on difficult climbing routes and previous disasters that had occurred on Everest. This journey was not just a physical struggle, it was also a test of mental toughness and endurance. While their goals were ambitious, they were also fully aware of the immense risks they faced. Each of them had taken various precautions, checked their equipment, and started setting up camps for weeks in advance. During this time, the climbers began to form strong bonds, supporting each other for a safe and successful ascent. Before the climb, the climbers consulted various weather forecasts, equipment recommendations, and expert advice to choose the best time to summit Everest. However, no forecast could fully predict the mountain's true power and how brutal nature could be. A journey this large could cause everything to spiral out of control at any moment. This adventure would not only test physical limits but also the mental resilience of the climbers. Although the climbers were prepared for the dangers of Everest, their relationship with the mountain was complex. Reaching the summit required not just physical strength, but also intelligence and logic. Many of the climbers had learned to deal with harsh weather conditions, high altitudes, extreme cold, and lack of oxygen during the climb. Most had spent several years preparing for this journey. Yet the greatest challenge for each of them was the anxiety and fear they felt as they approached Everest. These fears could grow so overpowering at any moment. They could take control of the climbers or their observers. The team, which started their journey at the foot of the mountain, stayed focused on the task ahead, trying to be cautious with every step they took. Each day brought new challenges. The obstacles they faced grew even more terrifying. Harsh weather, fog, and sudden storms could overwhelm the climbers at any moment. Sometimes walking became impossible in the dark, vast landscape. Yet, even in those moments, the climbers never gave up on their passion to reach the summit. Even, for a brief moment, a group of climbers, initially quite cheerful, motivated each other with conversations as they ascended. However, Everest's cold, harsh weather and dark, intimidating nature gradually reminded them just how difficult their challenge was. The idealistic outlook of the climbers began to shift, becoming more pragmatic as the days passed. Climbing the mountain, when faced with hardship, meant more than just focusing on the summit. With every growing difficulty, this journey, which pushed both physical and mental limits, brought the climbers close to death at every turn. During their time spent in the camps, they tried to lift each other's spirits by sharing old mountaineering stories. Yet the fears lurking in their subconscious grew deeper with each passing day. The high altitude, oxygen deprivation, and ever-changing weather forced the climbers to constantly fight for survival. The dangers of the mountain, such as struggling to breathe, tents being blown away by the wind, and rocks suddenly shifting and toppling, constantly reminded them of the mountain's immense power. Climbing to the summit is a dream for many, but a mountain like Everest requires not just a dream but also great risk and patience. For the climbers, this journey meant discovering their limits, understanding the true meaning of courage, and showcasing their will to survive with every step. Yet the inherent uncertainty and danger of nature made the climb always uncertain and terrifying. Reaching the summit and returning safely would not just be a goal, but a fight for survival. Meanwhile, the climbers' greatest concern was the bond they shared. Every obstacle they encountered strengthened their support for one another and reinforced their determination to climb together. Surviving together became their #1 priority. However, despite being prepared, They had no idea what awaited them in the face of the mountain's power. This journey would not only be a physical struggle, but also an adventure in which they would come to terms with their helplessness in the face of nature. Everest, famous for its natural beauty and challenges, is also considered one of the most dangerous mountains in the world. Every year, thousands of climbers aim to reach the summit, but due to the mountain's vastness and the harshness of nature, only a small fraction of these attempts are successful. The year 2015 was no different in this regard. Climbers, prepared for Everest's harsh conditions, continued their ascent with the goal of reaching the summit. However, no matter how prepared they were, they had yet to understand how helpless humans can be in the face of nature's power. As the climbers approached the summit, they began to notice that the weather was becoming more severe as they climbed higher. Cold winds, intense snowstorms, and freezing temperatures made the climb unbearable. However, the real danger was always natural disasters. The avalanche risk, in particular, was one of the greatest threats to climbers on Everest. Avalanches were powerful and destructive enough to wipe out climbers in an instant, but climbers often didn't realize the danger until it was too late. As the climbers got closer to the summit, the changes in the weather became more pronounced. Initially, the weather had been clear and sunny, but suddenly the skies darkened, the fog thickened, and the winds picked up speed. Weather forecasts had warned of avalanche risks, but these warnings were often ignored. The high altitude and natural conditions always created a dangerous combination. Many climbers eager to reach the summit ignored the surrounding dangers. A group of experienced climbers had several observers to assess the meteorological conditions. While they warned of avalanche risks, most climbers dismissed these warnings. Despite years of research about the mountain and its climate, many climbers were focused on one goal. No matter how prepared we are, reaching the summit is our only purpose. The entire team continued their climb, pushing their limits to reach the top. Climbers who ignored the avalanche warnings began to feel the weather worsening as they ascended. While climbing over rocks and ice, there were occasional slips due to the snow and ice. However, these were merely the hidden threats of the mountain. The real danger was the growing threat of massive avalanches beneath them. Even though they heard the warnings, the climbers, driven by the excitement of getting closer to the summit, decided to press on. Some climbers saw the other team's warning about avalanches as too cautious and therefore viewed the avalanche risk as nothing more than a statistical possibility. What more could happen, they thought. But the mountain, like a beast, was waiting to decide when it would swallow its climbers. Meanwhile, a few more experienced climbers, relying on their intuition about the avalanche danger, slowed down and became more cautious. But by then it was too late. The avalanche, like a dormant monster, was waiting patiently at the base of Everest, ready to pounce on the climber's fatal mistake. As the days passed, communication among the climbers began to dwindle. With the winds picking up, the weather became even more terrifying. Everyone was now focused solely on the summit. Even though they knew the weather could change abruptly and worsen, each climber remained determined to continue. At this point, human weakness in the face of nature's power was becoming more evident. No matter how prepared they were, even the most experienced climbers couldn't foresee the danger. In that moment, one climber felt the intensity of the freezing wind. It was so strong that each step felt like being glued to the ground. Though the other climbers continued their ascent, the increasingly serious avalanche warnings began to disturb them. However, this unease conflicted with their desire to press on. Getting closer to the summit would bring them the achievement they had dreamed of. Suddenly, another avalanche warning went out among the climbers. However, this warning was still not taken seriously enough. The avalanche remained a growing threat at the heart of the mountain, but no matter how much the climbers watched it, their determination to reach the summit overshadowed everything else. Eventually, when the danger became imminent, the realization that the avalanche risk was no longer a mere warning came too late. The climbers began to realize they were on the brink of disaster, facing death. And in that moment, the true face of Everest emerged. In all its grandeur and terror, nothing was stronger than the power of nature. As the climbers approached the summit with each passing day, Their tension and excitement grew. After their arduous journey, they spent the night in a camp. Each of them hoped to get a few hours of sleep to relieve some of their exhaustion. However, the mountain was hinting at a danger hidden behind its silence. The air was still cold and misty early in the morning, but such conditions were not unusual for climbers on Everest. For those who had prepared a few hours earlier and retreated to their tents to rest, it seemed like just another ordinary night in camp. Suddenly, a noise echoed from deep within the mountain. At first, several climbers mistook this sound for the howling of the wind or the falling of rocks. But this noise was not just a sound, it felt like a frightening threat. The rapidly changing rhythm of the air started to capture the climbers' attention. Seconds later, the volume of that terrifying noise increased and it was rapidly approaching. The sound of an avalanche, the most terrifying noise on the high mountains, sounded like a growl from an empty-bellied beast. The climbers had never heard this sound so close before. A sudden moment of awareness took hold of them. An avalanche. Slowly, the vibrations reached the ground and began to gain power. In that moment, everything was about to change within seconds. With that terrifying sound, the avalanche began to slide down Everest's summit at tremendous speed. At first, the climbers weren't sure exactly what was happening, but soon enough they started feeling the overwhelming power of the avalanche coming toward them. The avalanche, turning into a massive mass of snow and ice, erupted from the mountain's slopes. The sounds of debris crashing down on the ground echoed in the climbers' ears with every passing second. In the blink of an eye, the landscape around them would change entirely. Everyone scrambled to escape, trying to run for their lives. The avalanche was advancing with deadly speed, and the climbers were finding it difficult to find a place to escape. Many climbers were still trying to figure out what was happening inside their tents, but within seconds, everything turned into a chaotic panic. The climbers rushed out of their tents, nearly colliding with one another. The moment of escape was instinctive, lasting only a few seconds. The wind mixed with snow rattled their bodies. The air suddenly turned colder and more ominous. The climbers, rushing out of their tents, pushed each other, desperately trying to find a place of safety. But the avalanche was already moving rapidly down the mountain. The massive chunks of snow and ice were speeding down with a deafening sound toward the lower regions of the mountain. It was truly a disaster. As the avalanche drew closer, the climbers' fear grew exponentially. A group of climbers tried to escape, hoping against hope. However, they didn't realize the magnitude and speed of the avalanche. Large chunks of ice, huge rock fragments, and snow piles were rapidly tumbling down from above. As they tried to flee, the climbers weren't just panicking, they were terrified of being caught by the avalanche at any moment. Many climbers tried to scatter in different directions to avoid the avalanche, but the danger was everywhere. Every obstacle in their path only intensified the struggle to escape. Many climbers were swallowed up by the massive piles of snow and ice. Some slid away like a fast-moving river, disappearing, while others were trapped between the mounds. The avalanche, like a tsunami, consumed everything, burying the climbers beneath it. Some climbers tried to find a brief moment of air to survive, but they were lost among tunnels of snow and ice, sinking deeper with every step. In those moments, the struggle for survival had only just begun for those who remained alive. The air was dark and noisy. The avalanche was at the forefront of it all. On one hand, some climbers were desperately trying to find their friends who were fleeing the avalanche, while on the other hand, they were fighting for their own lives. Some people could hardly breathe. The freezing cold and the risk of being buried under snow left them utterly helpless. When the avalanche struck, every person who tried to escape had to muster all their courage to survive. Sadly, most of the climbers who were caught by the avalanche did not manage to survive the catastrophe. Each of their minds, in the face of the avalanche's overwhelming power, was thinking only one thing: survival. In that moment, nature had turned humans' deepest fears into reality. That terrifying avalanche, in just a few seconds, had swallowed hopes and dreams, showing the harsh and merciless face of Everest to the entire world. As the noise of the avalanche still echoed in their ears, the survivors, armed with only their survival instincts and the hopeless trust they had in each other, began their struggle to survive in the chaotic environment. The climbers tried to find each other immediately after the disaster, but due to the terrifying magnitude and speed of the avalanche, most had been separated. Some climbers were trapped in their tents when the avalanche struck, while others were buried deep in the snow while trying to escape. In the aftermath, the number of survivors dwindled rapidly, and those who remained began searching for each other with intense urgency, eager to seize the rare opportunity fate had granted them. However, everything had happened so quickly that time had become the greatest enemy for the survivors. The mountain, covered in snow and ice, carried the traces of the disaster at every corner, and everything around them looked like a death trap. A few of the survivors among the climbers decided to search for their lost friends. But this was not an easy task. The massive piles under the ice sheet hindered the climbers' movements, creating terrifying tightness and uncertainty with every step. The surviving group, tightly bound to each other, began to move forward through the dark and grim environment, trying to find some morale. Wearing torn, stiffened clothes from the freezing cold, they passed between the snow and ice-covered mountains. The silence was so deep that every step they took echoed the sound of the snow cracking. The avalanche, like a destruction, had swallowed everything around them, creating a ghost town. Each of these sounds caused anxiety in the hearts of the survivors, as they didn't know what they would encounter with each step. Starting the search and rescue mission meant both courage and helplessness for the climbers. The magnitude of the disaster had divided the survivors into two groups. One group immediately set off to escape the snow-covered mountains and reach a safe spot, while the other decided to follow the traces of their lost friends. However, these journeys felt like walking a fine line between life and death for each of them. They were running out of time to find their missing friends, because with every minute lost under the massive piles created by the avalanche, another life was being lost. When a group of climbers managed to escape the avalanche, they were shocked by the scale of the destruction. The avalanche had swept away most of the camp areas and several people. The remaining climbers were still trying to reach each other, but they had lost their way due to the surrounding snow piles and the avalanche. After the avalanche disaster, a few survivors had managed to survive by relying solely on each other. They were steadily moving toward the summit of the mountain, step by step searching for each other. With every step they risked more, but at the same time they hoped to leave a light of hope for the lives of their lost friends. Another group at this point had decided to take a different path toward salvation. They decided to climb beneath the ice sheet. Their goal was to escape from the snow and ice trapped in the depths of the avalanche and to communicate with a few remaining survivors. Slowly and cautiously, they began their climb to reach beneath the layers of ice. With every step, they realized how deep and dangerous the tunnels beneath the ice and snow were. But considering the magnitude of the avalanche disaster, they had no other choice. Surviving beneath the ice sheet was the only way to escape the deadly cold outside and the massive ice mass of the avalanche. Hoping to survive beneath the ice, the group ventured deeper into the dark path. Their courageous leader, moving ahead, as the guide, tried to ensure the safety of the group. But with every passing second they were sinking deeper into the dark tunnel. The cold air and the darkened glacial environment were mentally exhausting them even more. Fearing to encounter the bodies of their lost friends or meet wandering ghosts, the climbers continued searching for the traces of their missing companions. But every moment reminded them they needed to make new decisions for their lives and survival. The darkness beneath the ice spread deep fear in their hearts. Time was running out, so they continued with courage, taking each step without a glimmer of hope, trying to save others. All these struggles led the survivors to face their real fears. They were not only fighting to survive, but also making a final effort to save their lost friends. However, being helpless against nature introduced them to the deepest fear of all, the fear of being alone and lost. While the surviving climbers were trying to find each other, they were also racing against time. The magnitude of the avalanche disaster and the severity of the mountain were making their situation increasingly difficult. However, this group, fighting to survive, had to withstand all the hardships nature threw at them. At this point, they needed a light of hope, and that light would guide them toward the depths beneath the ice layers. As the weather grew colder, The snow piles rapidly increased, and the devastation caused by the avalanche made it more difficult for the survivors to find an escape route. Under these conditions, the remaining group decided to descend beneath the ice layers as a last resort, instead of considering climbing the rocky cliffs by the river or the high mountain passes. The space beneath the ice was a place where they hoped to overcome the depth of snow and ice. There was no turning back, and this new path seemed to be the only hope that could keep them alive. Climbing beneath the ice was one of the greatest challenges they faced with every step. In this area, where everything was covered in ice, as the depth of the snow and ice increased, breathing became harder with each passing second. The entire group moved forward, almost glued to each other. Every step was taken slowly and carefully. No matter how solid the ground seemed, there was always the risk of collapse, and the snow and ice piles were constantly trying to pull them down. As their feet sank deeper into the snow and ice, their courage was dwindling just as quickly. However, giving up was a thought they would never accept. As they moved deeper, they found themselves in an environment they had never experienced before, a world trapped in the depths, like a dark tunnel. Beneath the ice layers, feeling safe, for even a moment, was impossible. Everything was dark, and the ice walls and layers surrounding them continued to challenge them both physically and psychologically. Every step they took felt like walking a fine line between life and death. The icy environment, cold and hard like a tomb, was relentless. Clinging tightly to each other, they knew that the only thing they could rely on was one another. Their bond grew stronger with every passing minute. Encouraging each other, they moved forward, for nothing was stronger than the instinct to survive. In the darkness beneath the ice, there was only one goal: not to lose hope. Their love and friendship made them stronger. Looking back was not an option. Salvation could only be found by moving forward, deeper into the unknown. Descending beneath the ice, which initially seemed like it would take them to a safer area, became increasingly difficult. With every second, they exerted more energy, struggling to breathe. The air beneath the ice was incredibly cold and suffocating. Each step took them deeper, and with every passing minute, disaster seemed to draw closer. As their feet pressed into the snow-covered ground, the snow and ice rubbed against each other, creating a new mass that hindered the climbers' progress. At the same time, the sensation of being lost in the depths of darkness and silence caused a psychological collapse. However, there was only one thought they clung to in order to survive. Survive. In such a harsh environment, coming together to continue this struggle became the driving force that determined the difference between life and death for the survivors. Looking at each other for strength, they quickened their pace. The depth beneath the ice and snow was wearing them down. Sometimes when they thought it was all over, they took another step, exerting a little more strength. There was only one goal: survival. Their survival instinct allowed them to overcome all the pain and challenges they faced. As they continued, they realized just how difficult and dangerous the path they were taking was. The deep darkness beneath the ice became more palpable with each step. Breathing became harder every second, and moving forward in the dark tunnel was slowly eroding their spirits. But they continued to experience every moment together, for the bond and solidarity between them gave them the strength to survive. Descending deeper into the ice layers, everything they did to survive began to gain more meaning. The avalanche. Disaster was pushing them, but it was also bringing them together. Beneath the snow and ice, they were fighting their greatest battle to stay alive. After the avalanche disaster, the only way to survive was to trust each other more with every step. This salvation beneath the ice was not only a physical struggle, but also a psychological battle, clinging tightly to one another, fighting to survive. In the dark tunnel, in the cold and harsh conditions, they realized they had one more light of hope. Survival was not just about physical strength. Their inner strength fueled the climbers' determination to survive, pushing them one step further. On the path to salvation, the darkness beneath the ice drove them into an endless struggle, but it also brought them together, ensuring their survival. After the horror of the avalanche, the surviving climbers continued to push forward, clinging tightly to each other. Their journey through the darkness beneath the ice, fraught with dangers, had worn them down. Mentally and physically exhausted, every step they took brought them closer to safety but also made the journey even harder. Ultimately, they persevered with their survival instincts and their bond, focused on one thing: finding a safe haven. Trusting each other as they moved forward, they navigated through the dangerous tunnels of rivers, mountain passes, and ice masses, step by step toward the base of the mountain. The days following the avalanche had taken a toll on them. The deep snow and glacial environment had turned their struggle into an increasingly heavy battle. Whenever they attempted to rest, the cold, biting winds slapped their faces, pushing them forward by forcing them to take another step. But they never gave up. Despite their dwindling strength, they continued to support one another with unwavering determination. They faced numerous challenges. The ice layers grew deeper, the snow became harder, and reaching the base of the mountain required an immense effort. Yet, driven by the power of survival, the hope of finding that safe place kept them going. Finally, as a result of their grueling journey, they reached a somewhat safer area. This safe space represented more than just a physical shelter. It was a symbol of salvation. Yes, the path ahead was still perilous, but they had made it one step closer to survival. This safe zone, though not without its own memories of lost friends and the hardships they'd endured, brought a sense of peace amidst the torment. As the climbers set foot in the safe area, a sense of relief washed over them despite their overwhelming physical and mental exhaustion. Yet their sorrow for the friends they had lost was deep. The names of those trapped beneath the avalanche and ice would forever echo in their hearts, leaving an indelible sadness. But at the same time, the gratitude for having survived softened the ache of loss. They were silent for a while, the mental fatigue weighing heavily on their bodies. However, looking at one another, they could understand how their shared survival instinct had bound them together. After such a grueling journey, reaching the safe area showed them not only how precious survival was, but also the strength of solidarity between people. Each climber had survived because of the trust they had in one another. When one faltered, the others lifted them up. In the face of one person's desperation, the others responded with courage. This journey was not just about mountain climbing. It was a test of how much a person could endure in their toughest moments. The arrival of the rescue teams brought a deep sense of relief. The climbers, who had lost hope at times, finally heard the voices of the professional rescuers coming from a distance, and their hearts lightened. When they received the news of the rescue team's arrival, many couldn't hold back the tears streaming down their faces. There was hope. There was salvation. They embraced each other, knowing they would leave behind the horrors they had faced. With the belief that the rescue teams would do everything in their power to save the brave climbers, they waited in anticipation. As the climbers settled into the safe area to rest, they felt profoundly the significance of surviving such a difficult journey and disaster. The power of nature had tested humanity in every possible way. Yet the surviving climbers had overcome these challenges by trusting each other. The destructive force of nature had collided with humanity's will to survive, and in the end, it was humanity's triumph. Soon, the rescue teams transported the climbers to safe zones. The climbers, having survived against all odds, had etched their names into the history of mountaineering. This event, beyond just a survival struggle, had become a symbol of human resilience and determination against the power of nature. In that moment, it became clear to one climber's heart: no matter how weak a person may seem, the strength and solidarity within can always guide the way.